There are certain businesses people complain about constantly. And yet, somehow, those same businesses, they continue surviving for years. Not because customers love them, but because the trade actually feels worth it. So, on this channel, we will break down the psychology behind business, culture, power, and human behavior. And honestly, few companies exposed human behavior more clearly than Spirit Airlines. There was a period of time when flying Spirit Airlines almost felt like you were participating in a social experiment, right? Everybody complained about it. The seats, the delays, the hidden fees, the chaos at the gate. And yet, people continue booking flights with Spirit Airlines again and again and again. Because no matter how frustrating the experiment felt, the ticket was cheap enough to justify the inconvenience. Agree or disagree? And honestly, in my opinion, I feel that's one of the main reasons that made Spirit Airlines pretty interesting. People weren't choosing Spirit because they loved the experience. They were choosing Spirit because they were making a trade. I feel they were saying, I'll tolerate discomfort if the price is low enough. And for a long, 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 long time, okay, that trade, it actually worked, right? Then the headlines started changing. Talk of the financial struggles, mounting pressure, questions about, will Spirit even survive? And most people landed on a simple explanation. Huh, guess what? Fuel prices. And to be fair, those fuel prices absolutely mattered. The airlines depend heavily on fuel. So when fuel costs rise, pressure hits the entire industry, right? But check this out. Here's the important part: pressure doesn't affect every business equally. Hmm, right? Because Spirit's real vulnerability wasn't just the fuel prices, okay? It was the business model itself. Spirit built its entire identity around one main thing, and that's being the cheapest option. Not the most comfortable, not the most luxurious, and not the most reliable, just the cheapest. And when your entire position depends on keeping prices extremely low, okay, you leave yourself very little room to absorb any kind of pressure. So pressure hits differently. For instance, let's talk about a luxury airline. A luxury airline can rise prices more easily, right? And customers already expect to pay more. The margins are larger, the perception is stronger. But Spirit's customers came specifically for affordability. So when fuel prices increased, Spirit couldn't adjust the same way because the moment prices rise too much, the entire reason people tolerated the experience, it starts disappearing. And guess what else? Competitors, they they are usually able to adapt. And while Spirit was dealing with pressure, guess what the other airlines were doing? They were adapting. Basic economy tiers started appearing everywhere. Cheaper ticket options, lower cost seating, more flexibility in pricing. So now, guess what the customers could get? The similar pricing, stronger brand trust. And that's when Spirit's position became fragile. Okay, let's talk about the perception problem. Then there's the perception. People, they can tolerate inconvenience, but only for so long. And eventually, Spirit stopped feeling like a clever financial decision and started feeling unpredictable. Not because every flight was terrible, okay, but because the expectation became so negative. And perception changes behavior faster than those numbers. And honestly, this pattern exists far outside airlines. A lot of businesses and people, they build themselves around being sometimes starting out as the cheapest, the most available, the easiest option. Okay, that's normal. And in the beginning, that strategy creates a lot of attention. Would it catch your attention? Or someone who you know, would it catch their attention? But over time, it creates fragility. Because think about it. When pressure enters the system, you can't move. There's no room to maneuver. No room. You see this in careers as well. People, they kind of become known as the person who always says yes, the person who accepts the least, The person who overworks to stay valuable. Have you seen these traits in any of your coworkers or even in yourself? And eventually, they realize they created a position that depends on constant sacrifice, sacrifice after sacrifice after sacrifice. You see it in business. Companies, they're lowering prices until the profit margins they become dangerously thin. We even see it online. Let's ponder it a moment. Creators competing on volume, okay, and cheap attention instead of building perspective or authority. And once the environment changes, they disappear into the noise. They become a phantom like nothing ever happened. So, no, Spirit Airlines didn't collapse from one problem. It's raining here. Fuel prices were the pressure, but the business model, it determined how vulnerable the company was to that kind of pressure. And you know what I think? I think that's the part that some people miss, okay? Because anything built too tightly around being cheap, it eventually struggles when conditions change. And when the pressure hits a fragile position, collapse starts looking sudden, even when the weakness was there the entire time.